The Grand Council of Sentient Worlds convened in the vast, luminescent chamber of Arioth Prime, a place where time itself seemed to fold around the immense power gathered within. The Council's edicts shaped the fates of civilizations, their laws deciding which species flourished and which fell into oblivion. It was here that the fate of Earth's children was being debated, and at the center of it all stood Ambassador Lillian Wright. She was the sole representative of Earth in the Council, a woman with steel in her spine and fire in her gaze. The humans had only recently been granted a voice among the elder species, and even that had come at a great cost. Now they were being tested. Lillian took a deep breath and stepped forward, her form dwarfed by the alien entities surrounding her. Beings of every imaginable shape and size loomed in the chamber, some encased in shimmering light, others wrapped in flowing shadows. But the one who mattered most stood across from her, radiating silent menace. High Marshal Krelvok of the Zalarian Dominion. The Zalarians were old, predatory, a species that had risen long before Earth's sun had even ignited. Their kind had survived by consuming others, harvesting the genetic potential of weaker species, abducting younglings from developing civilizations to mold them into weapons, slaves, or worse. Lillian's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The children of Earth are not to be touched. That is the Council's decree. Krelvok did not move. His obsidian-black exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's floating lights, and his 4 crimson eyes flickered as if measuring her worth. When he finally spoke, his voice was a slow, deliberate grind of stone against stone. "You presume much, Terran." She did not flinch. I presume nothing. I state a fact. The Council has spoken. Humanity may be young, but we are not helpless. You will cease your operations on Earth immediately, or face consequences. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A few members of the Council watched with veiled interest, others with pity. Humanity was small on the cosmic stage. They had no fleets to rival the Zalarians, no superweapons to strike fear into the hearts of the ancients. And yet, here stood their ambassador, issuing threats to a species that had wiped entire civilizations from existence. Krelvok let the silence stretch before responding. "You mistake mercy for weakness." His mandibles twitched in something that might have been amusement. "Your species is young, naive. You do not understand how the galaxy works. We do not take because we desire war. We take because it is necessary. The strong shape the future. The weak provide the means." "Inferior?" Lillian's fists clenched at her sides. "We are not weak." "You will learn," Krelvok said simply, then turned and strode out of the chamber. The Council remained silent. Lillian exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had just happened. She had issued a warning. She had done everything within her power to stop them. But she knew. They wouldn't listen. The first child vanished 3 weeks later. 12-year-old Evan Carter had been playing outside his family's ranch in Wyoming when he disappeared without a trace. One moment he had been there, kicking a ball with his dog. The next he was gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle. His mother swore she had only looked away for a moment. Then it happened again. And again. Children from every corner of the world began vanishing. Some from their beds at night, others from playgrounds, from schoolyards. The disappearances were silent, surgical, no security footage, no witnesses. Just empty spaces where once there had been laughter. Panic gripped humanity. Parents refused to let their children outside. Governments scrambled for answers. Conspiracies ran rampant. Some believed it was mass hysteria. Others thought it was the work of secret organizations. But Lillian Ray knew the truth. She stormed into the United Nations underground war room, her face pale with fury. The room was filled with Earth's most powerful leaders, military strategists and scientific minds, all desperate for a solution. Admiral Jason Crow, head of Earth's fledgling planetary defense initiative, leaned forward, his scarred face unreadable. "Then we stopped them ourselves." A murmur rippled through the room. Dr. Hayashi, the head of Earth's Xeno-Diplomatic Corps, shook his head. "We don't have the firepower to take on the Zalarians in open war. They've been doing this for millennia. We're an emerging species. We don't stand a chance." "We don't have to win a war," Lillian countered. "We just have to make them bleed." Craw exhaled slowly. "You want to strike first?" She met his gaze. "Yes." He considered this for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we need to hit them where it hurts." A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the table. An image of Tekalvar, one of the Jalarian Dominion's primary outposts, glowed in blue light. It was a trafficking hub, a place where stolen younglings were processed before being sent deeper into Jalarian space. Ah! Lillian's stomach twisted at the thought of Earth's missing children being held there. Craw's voice was grim. "We take it out." The Sovereign emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zalarian Dominion's territory. It was Earth's most advanced warship, a prototype constructed in secret, its hull lined with stolen shielding technology, an act of defiance against the Council's restrictions. On the bridge, Admiral Crow stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The crew moved around him with tense efficiency, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on them all. "Weapon systems online," Lieutenant Mara Dorsey reported. "Target locked." The Zalarians had not expected an attack. They had not believed that Earth, young, insignificant Earth, would dare strike at them. That was their mistake. "Fire," Crow ordered. The Sovereign's main cannons unleashed a torrent of energy, lances of pure light carving through the orbital defenses of Tekalvar. The Jalarian outpost shuddered under the assault, alarms blaring through the void as explosions rippled across its surface. Panic erupted within the Dominion's ranks. Zalarian warships scrambled to respond, moving into defensive formations. The comms crackled. "Terran vessel, cease fire or be destroyed." Cray leaned forward, voice cold. "Come and try." A fleet of Zalarian ships surged toward them. The Sovereign twisted through the void, outmaneuvering the enemy vessels with technology they did not expect. Plasma fire erupted in all directions. But the humans were not here for a prolonged battle. Inside the chaos, a strike team was already on the surface of Tekalvar. Marines in advanced combat armor moved through the burning corridors, gunning down Zalarian guards with precision. Their mission was simple: find the children. Lillian's voice came through Crow's private channel. "Jason, you know what to do." He nodded grimly. This wasn't just about a rescue anymore. This was war. The Sovereign trembled under the force of enemy fire, its reinforced hull absorbing the brunt of the Zalarian counterattack. Admiral Jason Crow stood firm on the bridge, his expression like carved stone as he analyzed the battlefield. Earth's first interstellar warship was outnumbered, but it was not outmatched. They had built the Sovereign for this moment. Stolen technology, experimental weaponry, and the element of surprise. But even with all of that, Crow knew their window of opportunity was closing. "Shields holding at 62%, Lieutenant Mara Dorsey called out, fingers flying across her console. "Zalarian reinforcements inbound. They'll be in range in 5 minutes. Craw nodded. "We don't need 5 minutes. We only need 3. Focus fire on their point defense turrets. Open a path for the strike team." The ship vibrated as its forward cannons unleashed another devastating volley, cutting through the enemy defenses like a blade through flesh. Explosions erupted along the surface of Tekalvar, the orbital station cracking apart under the relentless assault. Inside the chaos, the strike team advanced. Lillian Ray moved swiftly through the darkened corridors of the station, her pulse hammering in her ears. The weight of the rifle in her hands felt foreign. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, but she had refused to stay behind. This mission was too important. The halls of Tekalvar were cold, metallic, and reeked of something she couldn't place. Something acrid, something wrong. She ignored the unease curling in her gut and pressed forward, her boots barely making a sound against the smooth floors. Behind her, Captain Elias Vaughn led the Marines, his armor scuffed from the earlier firefight. His voice was steady in her earpiece. "Command, we're approaching the containment sector. Resistance is heavier than expected." "We'll buy you time," Crow's voice responded. "Get those kids." Lillian tightened her grip on her weapon as they reached a set of massive, reinforced doors. Alien glyphs glowed faintly along the metal surface, shifting like living things. This was it. Vaughn motioned to his tech specialist, Sergeant Layla Kasim, who knelt beside the control panel, her gloved fingers moving quickly over the unfamiliar interface. "Give me 30 seconds, she muttered. They didn't have 30 seconds. The Zolarians came fast, shadows moving in the dim light. Vaughn's Marines reacted instantly, unleashing bursts of energy fire that lit up the corridor, the air filled with a smell of scorched metal and burnt flesh. Lillian ducked behind cover, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had seen war from a distance. Diplomatic reports, grainy footage, but this was different. This was real. She forced herself to move, to aim, to fire. A Zelzarian soldier crumpled under her shot, its black carapace smoking where the blast had hit. It didn't feel like victory. Kasim cursed. "They've locked it from the other side. I need a bypass." Vaughn didn't hesitate. "Step back." A Marine hefted a breaching charge onto the door. The explosion sent a shock wave through the corridor, and the reinforced metal buckled, twisting inward with a shriek. Smoke and sparks filled the air as the team rushed through the opening. Lillian's stomach turned at what she saw inside. Rows upon rows of containment pods lined the cavernous room, each one filled with a child. Human children. Their small bodies were suspended in a thick, gel-like substance, eyes closed, limbs unmoving. Strange, pulsing tubes were connected to their skin, siphoning something away. Life. She choked back bile. "Oh my God." A scream shattered the air. A child, awake, terrified. A girl, no older than 10, pounded against the glass of her pod, her wide eyes filled with panic. Her mouth moved, but no sound came through the containment field. Lillian rushed forward, pressing a hand against the cold surface. "We're here," she whispered, though the girl couldn't hear her. "We're getting you out." Kasim was already working, overriding the control systems, forcing the pods to release their captives. One by one, the children were freed, coughing, gasping, stumbling into the arms of the waiting Marines. Some were too weak to stand. Others didn't move at all. Vaughn's voice was sharp. "Command, we have them." Crow's response came instantly. "Good. Now get the hell out." But the Zolarians weren't done. The station shuddered violently as something massive detonated in the distance. Warning sirens blared in an alien tongue. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Lillian's stomach sank. "They're scuttling the station," Kasim realized, horror lacing her voice. Vaughn swore. "They'd rather destroy everything than let us take them." "Move!" Lillian shouted. The team sprinted through the collapsing corridors, carrying the children, dodging falling debris. Explosions rocked the structure. The entire station was dying around them. Ahead, their shuttle waited, engines hot. Marines piled inside, securing the children as the doors began to close. Lillian turned to make sure no one had been left behind. And that's when she saw him. A boy no older than 6 curled against the wall, his thin frame shaking. She didn't think. She ran. Behind her, Vaughn shouted something, but she couldn't hear him. The only sound was the blood rushing in her ears as she scooped the child into her arms. His body was too light, too fragile. The team sprinted through the collapsing corridors, carrying the children, dodging falling debris. Explosions rocked the structure. The entire station was dying around them. Ahead, their shuttle waited, engines hot. Marines piled inside, securing the children as the doors began to close. Lillian turned to make sure no one had been left behind. And that's when she saw him. A boy no older than 6, curled against the wall, his thin frame shaking. She didn't think. She ran. Behind her, Vaughn shouted something, but she couldn't hear him. The only sound was the blood rushing in her ears as she scooped the child into her arms. His body was too light, too fragile. She turned. A shadow loomed. Crenonc. The Zalarian High Marshal stood in the collapsing corridor, his crimson eyes locked onto hers. He wasn't running. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. Lillian's breath hitched. "I warned you," she said, tightening her grip on the boy. Krelvok tilted his head. "And yet you still came?" She didn't have time for this. The station was moments away from complete destruction. Krelvok stepped forward, but he did not attack. He simply watched, calculating. "You think you've won?" he asked, almost amused. "You've taken a handful. There will be more." Not if she had anything to say about it. Lillian turned and ran. The shuttle's doors slammed shut behind her just as the station's structure gave way, collapsing into the void. The ship rocketed away, narrowly escaping the explosion that consumed Tikhalvar. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Crow exhaled sharply. "They're clear." Lillian sagged against the wall of the shuttle, the boy still clutched in her arms. He trembled against her, tiny hands fisting in her jacket. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe now." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ragged breathing of the rescued children, the quiet sniffles of fear and exhaustion. Then Vaughn broke the silence. This was just the beginning, wasn't it? Lillian looked down at the boy in her arms, at the others huddled together. She thought of Kralbach's words. No, this wasn't over. This was only the beginning of the war to come. The children had been saved, but the war had only begun. Lillian Ray sat on the bridge of the Sovereign, exhaustion pressing down on her like a physical weight. Around her, the crew moved with a tense urgency, coordinating their retreat from Zalarian space. The ship's engines burned hot, pushing them toward the safety of a distant Council-monitored zone. But they all knew that safety was a fragile illusion. The Dominion would not take this attack lightly. Across from her, Admiral Crow studied the tactical displays, his sharp gaze scanning for any sign of pursuit. His jaw was set in a hard line. "We're not out of this yet," he muttered. "They're going to come after us." Lillian exhaled. "Let them." Cross shot her a look. "Don't pretend like we can win a head-on fight. We barely made it out of there alive." She knew he was right. The Sovereign had sustained damage in the battle, and their experimental shields were running dangerously low. If the Zilarians pursued, they would be hard-pressed to escape another encounter. The quiet sound caught her attention. Lillian turned toward the medical bay, where the rescued children were being cared for. Some were asleep, curled together in thin blankets. Others sat in stunned silence, eyes empty, staring at something only they could see. Then there were the ones who wouldn't wake up at all. She swallowed against the lump in her throat. She had seen many horrors during her time as a diplomat, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Zalarians hadn't just taken these children, they had used them, experimented on them. And some of them had been too far gone to be saved. A small voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are we going home?" She looked down. The little boy she had carried from the station, 6, maybe 7 years old, stood beside her, looking up with wide, tired eyes. His face was gaunt, his skin too pale, but he was alive. That was something. She knelt beside him. "Yes, we're taking you back to Earth." He hesitated. "Is my mom there?" Lillian opened her mouth and closed it. She didn't know. The Zalarians had taken children from all over the planet. Some parents had been left searching, desperate. Others had been killed when they had tried to fight back. "We'll find her," she said gently. "I promise." The boy nodded, trusting her completely. She wished she deserved that trust. A sudden alarm cut through the quiet. The bridge lights shifted to red, and Crow's voice came sharp and clear. "We've got incoming." Lillian stood, pulse hammering. "How many?" Dorsky's fingers danced over the console, her expression grim. 4 Zalarian warships, fast attack vessels. They must have been patrolling the sector. "They're vectoring in," another officer called. "They'll intercept us in 90 seconds. Lillian cursed under her breath. The Sovereign was powerful, but it wasn't designed to take on an entire fleet alone. They were still too close to Zolarian space to call for help. Cross straightened. "Bring the weapons online. Ready countermeasures. We'll fight if we have to." Lillian stepped forward. "You know we won't win that fight. We don't have another choice." The crew turned to her. "I'm listening." She met his gaze. "They don't just want to destroy us. They want the children back." Silence fell across the bridge. She continued. "We use that. We tell them we'll destroy the ship and everyone on it before we let them take even one child. Make them believe it." Craw exhaled. "That's a hell of a bluff." "It's not a bluff," she said flatly. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Open a channel." The comms officer complied, and moments later the cold, sharp voice of a Zolarian commander filled the bridge. "Terran vessel, you are trespassing in Dominion space. Power down your weapons and surrender. If you comply, we will be merciful." Crow didn't hesitate. "That's not happening." A pause. Then, "You have taken what belongs to us. Return the specimens and we will allow your crew to live." Lillian stepped forward. "You're not getting them back, ever." The Zolarian's voice darkened. "You do not understand what you are interfering with." Lillian's hands curled into fists. "No, you don't understand. We are done letting you take our children. You want them, come and take them. But know this, if even one of your ships moves to engage, we'll overload our reactors. We'll turn this ship into a fireball so bright your homeworld will see it." Silence. Lillian pressed on. "You want to explain to your superiors why you lost 4 warships and your best chance at recovering your precious specimens? Go ahead. But if you have any sense, you'll turn your ships around and let us leave." The Zolarian commander didn't answer immediately. She imagined him sitting there, considering, calculating. Then, "Your kind will suffer for this," he said coldly. "You have made an enemy of the Dominion." The transmission cut out. For several long seconds no one moved. Then Dorsey spoke, voice disbelieving. "They're withdrawing." Lillian exhaled, her shoulders sagging. Crawd let out a low breath. "You really were ready to blow the ship, weren't you?" She didn't answer. They both knew the truth. The Zolarians had let them go, this time, but they wouldn't forget. The Dominion didn't forgive. Lillian looked back at the children, at the boy still standing by her side. "We need to get home," she said quietly. The Sovereign engaged its faster-than-light drive, leaving Zolarian space behind. They returned to Earth as heroes. The mission had been deemed impossible, a suicide run, and yet they had done it. They had struck at one of the Dominion's strongholds and rescued dozens of children. It was a victory unlike anything humanity had achieved before. But it was a victory paid for in blood. Lillian stood on the steps of the United Nations building, looking out over the massive crowd that had gathered. Parents held their children tightly, some sobbing in relief, others searching for faces that would never return. Soldiers stood at attention, their uniforms crisp, their eyes weary. The world had changed in the span of a single mission. A war had begun. Lillian took a slow breath and stepped forward. The microphones buzzed as they adjusted to her presence, broadcasting her voice to billions across the planet. "We warned them," she said, voice steady. "We told them to leave our children alone. We gave them a chance to stop. They refused." Silence gripped the crowd. She continued. "The Zolarian Dominion has preyed on weaker species for millennia. They believe we are weak, that we will kneel, that we will surrender our future without a fight." She let her gaze sweep across the sea of faces. "They are wrong." A murmur rippled through the gathering. She took another step forward. "We did not ask for this war, but we will not run from it. We will not hide. We will not allow a single child to be taken from us again." She turned toward the sky where the sovereign hovered, gleaming in the sunlight. To the Jalarian Dominion I say this. She met the cameras head-on. You came for our children, we are coming for you. The crowd erupted, a sound of anger, of defiance, of war. The Xalarians had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity.